My brother smirked across the table and said, "You'll never be successful like me." That line still rings in my head like a bell. My name's Jacob. I'm 27, and I've spent most of my adult life being the responsible one in my family. I was the kid who got a job at 16, saved every penny, and made sure mom's bills were paid when things got tight. My older brother, Ryan, was the golden child, the one everyone praised for his potential, even though he never seemed to actually do anything with it. Our family dynamic has always been complicated. Dad left when I was 9, and Mom worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Ryan was supposed to be the man of the house, but most of the time, that meant playing video games and talking about the startup he was going to launch one day. Meanwhile, I was the one unclogging the sink, figuring out how to pay for new tires for Mom's car, and negotiating late fees with the electric company. I never minded helping. Honestly, there was a certain pride in it. It felt good to know I was keeping us afloat. But somewhere along the line, it stopped feeling like help and started feeling like obligation. Like my entire identity in this family was just being the backup plan whenever Ryan flaked out or Mom fell behind. That's why Ryan's comment hit me harder than I expected. It was a casual Saturday dinner at Mom's house. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread. We were sitting around the table, and Ryan was bragging about some networking event he'd gone to, talking about the people he met, the deals he was apparently making. Mom ate it up, nodding along and saying how proud she was of him. Then she turned to me and said, "Jacob, maybe you could learn a thing or two from your brother about ambition." I laughed because I thought she was joking. But when I looked up, she was dead serious. And that's when Ryan leaned back in his chair, smirked, and delivered the line that lit the fuse. "You'll never be successful like me." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Like he'd already won some imaginary competition I didn't even know we were having. Like all the nights I stayed up calculating which bills could wait until next week didn't matter. Like I was just the guy holding the family together while he got to play future millionaire with zero consequences. I felt this strange calm wash over me. Instead of snapping back, I smiled. "Cool," I said, my voice steady. "Then you can cover Mom's bills from now on." Ryan blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Mom frowned. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I mean, I've been paying the gas, electric, and half the mortgage for the last 3 years," I said, keeping my tone light. "But if Ryan's the successful one, he can take over. Starting next month, I'm done." The room went completely silent. Ryan's smirk faltered for the first time all evening, and Mom just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. I didn't stick around for the argument I knew was coming. I grabbed my jacket, said goodnight, and left. Driving home, my heart was pounding. I wasn't angry anymore. I was relieved. It was like I'd just cut a chain I didn't even realize I'd been dragging behind me. But I also knew that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. 2 days later, Mom texted me, "We need to talk about what you said." And that's when things started getting ugly. When I got that text from Mom, I stared at my phone for a full minute before answering. "We can talk," I typed back, "but I'm not changing my mind." She didn't respond until later that night when she called me. The first thing she said, before even saying hello, was, "You can't just stop paying the bills, Jacob. We'll lose the house." Her voice was panicked, like I'd just threatened to burn the place down. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting her words hang there. "Mom," I said slowly, "you told me last month Ryan finally got that promotion. He's making more than me now. Why can't he help?" There was a pause. Then, in a low voice, she said, "Because he's saving for his business. He needs every penny." I actually laughed, which made her go quiet. "Mom, I've been needing every penny since I was 16, I said. "And somehow I still made sure the lights stayed on. Ryan can chip in. He's 30. That's when she switched tactics. "Jacob, you've always been the responsible one," she said in that soft, guilt-soaked tone that used to work on me when I was younger. "You know your brother isn't good with money. If you stop helping now, what are we supposed to do?" I clenched my jaw because I could feel the old reflex to cave creeping up on me. I pictured the stack of receipts on my desk, years of bills with my name on them, and felt my spine stiffen. "Figure it out," I said finally. "I've done my part." She didn't say goodbye before hanging up. The next day, I got a text from Ryan. It just said, "Wow, way to abandon your family." I didn't respond. For the first week, I thought maybe they'd just accept it and move on. But the calls and texts kept coming. Mom would leave me voicemails with little digs hidden inside. I hope you're eating well. We had to cut back on groceries this week. Your brother said we might need to cancel the internet if we can't pay on time. Ryan, on the other hand, was more direct. Guess mom can't watch her shows now because of you, he texted one night. But hey, at least you can buy yourself more toys, right? For the record, the toys he was talking about were the secondhand tools I'd bought for my car. Tools that I saved for months to afford. It wasn't just the messages, either. The next Sunday, Mom asked me to come over for dinner like nothing had happened. Against my better judgment, I went. From the moment I walked in, I could feel the tension crackling in the air. Ryan was already there, sprawled on the couch, looking smug. Mom was in the kitchen, but she didn't greet me like she usually did. Dinner was tense, to put it lightly. Every topic seemed to circle back to money. Mom complained about the electric bill being higher than usual. Ryan made some joke about how he should charge me rent for eating at his table since he was basically paying for everything now. I put my fork down. Are you paying for everything now? I asked, looking him dead in the eye. He hesitated just a fraction of a second too long before saying, "Well, I'm taking on more than you are." That's when Mom chimed in. "Jacob, we just don't understand why you're doing this to us. After everything we've been through as a family, why now?" "Because I'm tired, Mom," I said quietly. "I'm tired of carrying this on my own." Ryan rolled his eyes. "Oh, please, don't act like you're some kind of hero. You just want an excuse to stop helping." Something in me snapped a little at that. "Helping," I said, my voice sharper now. "I've been paying half this mortgage since I was 24. You know what I was doing the night of my college graduation? Not celebrating. I was sitting in the bank parking lot transferring my last $200 to make sure we didn't default." Mom's face softened for a second, but Ryan just shrugged. "Nobody asked you to do that," he said. That was it for me. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and said, "You're right. Nobody did. And nobody will ever have to again." I left before they could say anything else. Over the next few days, the guilt-tripping turned into open hostility. Mom sent me a long message saying she was disappointed in me and that I was punishing her for being proud of my brother. Ryan went on a spree posting pictures on social media, fancy dinners, drinks with friends, with captions like, "Success tastes sweet." I knew he was trying to bait me. I ignored it. But the part that really got to me was when Mom stopped calling just to talk. For years, we'd chat at least once a week about little things: her garden, her coworkers, the neighbor's dog. Now every message had an undercurrent of desperation or accusation. "We barely made the mortgage this month." The water company sent another notice. "I guess we'll just have to get used to living without heat." It was like she wanted me to feel the weight of every bill I wasn't paying. And I did. I felt it pressing down on me at night when I tried to sleep. I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder if I was being selfish, if I was letting my mom down after everything she'd done for us. But then I'd think about Ryan, sitting at that dinner table smirking, and the doubt would fade. The breaking point came 2 weeks later when I stopped by the house to drop off a package that had accidentally been delivered to my address. Ryan was there, of course, and he didn't even look up from his phone when I walked in. Well, he said without glancing at me. "Look who decided to visit the peasants." I bit back my first instinct to snap and just set the package down on the counter. "This came to my place," I said. Mom came into the room then, looking more tired than I'd ever seen her. "Jacob," she said, her voice heavy. "We're 3 days from the mortgage being late. Can't you just help this month?" I looked at her, and for a second, I almost said yes. But then Ryan laughed, actually laughed, and said, "Yeah, come on, hero. Save the day like you always do." That was when I knew things were about to change. After that night in Mom's kitchen, I tried to keep my distance. I figured space might calm things down, maybe give everyone time to adjust. But that wasn't what happened. A few days later, I came home from work to find a letter taped to my apartment door. It was from the bank. My stomach dropped. I'd never seen a letter like this before. Inside was a notice saying the joint mortgage account was now delinquent, and that unless payment was made in full within 5 business days, foreclosure proceedings could begin. I sat on the edge of my couch, letter in hand, heart pounding. I wasn't even sure why I was still on the mortgage. I'd been paying it for years, but technically, the house belonged to Mom. When I called the bank to ask what was going on, they told me that not only was the mortgage behind, but the automatic payments that used to come out of my account had been canceled. Canceled? I repeated. "Yes," the representative said. "Someone removed your payment information 2 weeks ago." 2 weeks ago, right around the time I'd told them I was done. I thanked the representative, hung up, and sat there staring at my phone. There was only one person who had the account login besides me, Mom. I called her right away. "Why did you remove my payments from the account?" I asked, not even bothering with a hello. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because I thought it would be better if Ryan handled it." I felt like someone had punched me. "Better?" I said, my voice rising. "You're 3 days away from missing the mortgage, Mom. He hasn't paid a dime, has he?" She didn't answer, and that silence told me everything I needed to know. "Jacob," she said finally, "Ryan promised me he'd have the money by Friday. He said he's waiting for a client payment." "Mom, he's lying," I snapped. "He's been lying for years. And you chose to trust him with the house." "I didn't want to pressure you anymore," she said quietly. "You sounded so angry. I thought if Ryan handled it, we could keep the peace." I hung up. I didn't trust myself to say anything else without exploding. The next day, I stopped by the house to pick up a few things I'd left there. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw a brand new gaming chair sitting in the back of Ryan's car, still in the box. Inside, I found Ryan in the living room, setting up a new monitor. "Where did you get the money for that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He grinned without looking up. "Client payment came in. Treated myself." I stared at him. "So the house is still behind, but you bought yourself a new monitor?" He shrugged. "Relax. I'll cover the mortgage eventually. You think one late payment is gonna ruin everything?" "Yeah, actually, I do," I said, my hands curling into fists. "That's not how mortgages work, Ryan. You miss a payment, it tanks Mom's credit. You miss enough, you lose the house." He finally looked at me, smirked back in place. "Then maybe you should pay it if you care so much." I don't even remember leaving the house. I just remember being back in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Mom. "We got a notice on the door. Please, Jacob, we can't lose this house." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I drove over there to see the notice for myself. It was taped right to the front door, big red letters spelling out final warning. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, her face pale. Ryan was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Ryan?" I asked. She hesitated. "He's out with friends." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Mom, this is what I was afraid of. You trusted him, and he blew it. Now you want me to clean it up?" Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't know what else to do, Jacob. We can't lose the house." At that moment, Ryan came through the door, laughing about something on his phone. When he saw me, he groaned. "Oh great. Here comes Mr. Responsible to lecture me again." I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. "You think this is funny?" I shouted, holding up the notice. "We are 3 days from foreclosure, Ryan. 3 days. And you're out buying gaming chairs and going to bars." He rolled his eyes. "You're so dramatic. Mom will figure it out. She always does." That was the moment something in me broke completely. "You know what, Ryan?" I said, my voice suddenly calm. "You're right. Mom will figure it out. But I won't be part of it." Mom looked up, alarmed. "Jacob, please." "No," I said firmly. "This isn't on me anymore. I warned you both. I told you I was done. And you made your choice." Ryan smirked. "Good. Don't let the door hit you on the way out." I walked out without another word. But as I drove away, I knew this wasn't the end. Something had shifted inside me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect, about years of being taken for granted finally catching up to them. And this time, I wasn't going to be the one cleaning up their mess. After that last blow-up, I stopped going to the house completely. No more Sunday dinners. No more quick drop-ins. No more answering Ryan's texts, which by now had devolved into one-liners like, "Thanks for abandoning your family, bro, and hope you're happy when Mom loses the house." But ignoring them didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it made me feel worse. Every night I'd sit in my apartment, staring at my phone, half expecting to get a message saying they'd been evicted. I barely slept. The little sleep I did get was filled with dreams of coming home to find my childhood house boarded up, Mom sitting on the curb with boxes piled around her. At work, I was distracted and short-tempered. My boss noticed. "Everything okay at home?" he asked one morning after I missed a deadline. I opened my mouth to say yes, but what came out was closer to the truth. Not really. That night, after pacing around my apartment for nearly an hour, I finally caved and drove past the house. I didn't stop, didn't go in. I just slowed down enough to see the lights were still on. A strange mix of relief and bitterness washed over me. They were still there, still surviving somehow, but I knew it was temporary. If Ryan hadn't magically found the money by now, things were only going to get worse. And the worst part was, I missed them. I missed Mom's late-night calls about silly neighborhood gossip. I missed the sound of her humming in the kitchen while cooking. Even Ryan, as infuriating as he was, left a strange, empty space in my life. We'd fought like cats and dogs growing up, but at least back then it felt like we were on the same team against the world. Now it felt like I'd been traded to the opposing side. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Then one day I came home to a voicemail from Mom, her voice breaking halfway through. "Jacob, the bank gave us another extension, but I don't know what to do anymore. Ryan keeps saying he's got it under control, but he hasn't paid anything yet. I don't want to lose the house. Please, can we just talk?" I sat there on the couch with the phone in my hand, listening to that message over and over until my chest hurt. Part of me wanted to call her back right then, to swoop in and fix everything like I always did. But another part of me, the part that remembered Ryan's smirk and Mom's choice to trust him over me, told me to stay put. The next weekend, I got my answer about how things were going without me. I was sitting in my apartment, half watching a movie, when there was a knock on my door. It was one of Mom's neighbors, a sweet older man named Bill who'd watched us grow up. "Jacob," he said, looking uncomfortable, "I thought you should know there's a notice on your mom's door again. Bigger one this time. Looks like the bank's serious." I thanked him, closed the door, and just stood there in my living room. My heart was racing, but my mind felt strangely clear. This was rock bottom. I knew now that if I didn't do something, they were going to lose the house. Mom would have to move in with a relative or into some tiny apartment she couldn't afford. Ryan would blame me forever. And as much as I wanted to tell myself it wasn't my problem, I couldn't shake the thought that I'd regret doing nothing for the rest of my life. But, and this was the crucial difference, I wasn't going to swoop in quietly this time. I sat down at my desk, pulled out my laptop, and started running numbers. If I stepped in and made a payment, I could bring the mortgage current. But just paying it off once wasn't enough. They'd just fall behind again if nothing changed. So I made a plan. Step 1 was to get clarity on exactly how bad things were. I called the bank first thing Monday morning and asked for a full account statement. When they emailed it over, I nearly choked. Not only was the mortgage behind by 2 months, but there were also late fees and penalties that had nearly doubled the amount owed. Step 2 was to separate my financial connection from theirs, permanently. If I was going to do this, I needed control. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer to discuss my options. By the end of the week, I had a list of steps. I could bring the mortgage current, but I could also file paperwork to remove myself from the obligation entirely afterward. If Mom and Ryan wanted to keep the house, they'd have to refinance under their own names. It was the perfect middle ground. I wouldn't abandon Mom completely, but I'd also never again be the safety net they relied on by default. But before I could take action, I had to see for myself just how bad things had gotten. That Friday night, I drove to the house and parked across the street. From where I sat, I could see the notice still taped to the door. The curtains were half closed, but I could just make out the glow of the TV inside. After a long minute, I stepped out of the car and walked up to the porch. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from resolve. When I knocked, it took a while for anyone to answer. Finally, Mom opened the door. Her face lit up for half a second before she seemed to remember she was supposed to be upset with me. "Jacob," she said quietly, "I didn't think you'd come." I didn't step inside. Instead, I nodded toward the notice on the door. "How many of these have you gotten?" I asked. Her shoulders sagged. "3," she admitted. Behind her, I could see Ryan sprawled on the couch, playing on his phone. He didn't even look up. Something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about saving the house anymore. This was about making sure they understood what it had cost me to keep it this long, and what it was going to cost them if they didn't change. I took a deep breath and said, "We need to talk. All of us." Ryan snorted from the couch. "Here we go again." But I didn't rise to the bait this time. For the first time in months, I felt like I was holding all the cards. And that's when the idea for exactly how to handle this started to form in my mind. An idea that would finally force Ryan to face the mess he'd created and prove to Mom that I wasn't just being selfish. I left that night without saying anything more, but by the time I got home, the plan was taking shape, and I knew it was going to hurt. That night, I didn't sleep much, but for the first time in months, it wasn't because I was worried. It was because my mind wouldn't stop spinning with possibilities. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee and wrote down exactly what I wanted to happen. Not just save the house. I wrote down my bigger goal: regain control, stop being the family doormat, and make Ryan feel the consequences of his choices. Step 1 was financial. I met with the lawyer I'd called the week before. He was a calm, older guy with wire-rimmed glasses who listened carefully as I explained everything. How I'd been paying half the mortgage for years, how Mom had handed control to Ryan, how the house was now on the verge of foreclosure. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You've got options. If you want to save the house, but stop being financially responsible, you can absolutely bring the mortgage current, then file to remove yourself from the loan. If they can't refinance without you, that's on them." Just hearing that made something loosen in my chest. It was like someone had just handed me the key to a cage I didn't even realize I was sitting in. I authorized the payment to bring the mortgage current, but I didn't tell Mom or Ryan yet. Not until I was ready. Step 2 was focusing on my own life. For years, I'd been funneling so much of my money into the house that I barely had a savings account. Now, with that obligation about to end, I started building one. I opened a separate account just for me and set up automatic transfers every payday. Watching the balance grow, even just a little, gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. I also threw myself into work. Maybe it was the shift in mindset, but within a few weeks, my boss noticed the difference. "I don't know what changed," he told me one afternoon, "but you're sharper lately. More focused." He wasn't wrong. Without the constant financial drain, I suddenly had mental space for things other than stress. I started staying a little later to finish projects, volunteering for tasks nobody else wanted. 2 months later, I was called into his office and offered a promotion, and a raise big enough to make me grin all the way home. I celebrated quietly. No big announcement, no family dinner. Just me, a nice steak, and the knowledge that I was finally building something of my own. But I didn't forget the house. Every time I transferred money into savings, I thought about Ryan and his new gaming chair. Every time I stayed late at work, I thought about Mom sitting at the kitchen table crying because she trusted him. And slowly, I built my leverage. I started documenting everything: the payment I'd made to bring the mortgage current, the bank statements showing months of missed payments before that, screenshots of Ryan's posts bragging about nights out while the house was in danger. If there was going to be a confrontation, and I knew there would be, I wanted to be prepared. Meanwhile, Ryan seemed blissfully unaware that the walls were closing in. From what I saw on social media, he was living it up: concerts, weekend trips, fancy dinners. I didn't comment, didn't like, or react to any of it. Let him think I was out of the picture. The truth was, I was stronger than ever. I started hitting the gym after work. Nothing extreme, just 3 days a week to clear my head. At first, I could barely bench the bar, but after a few months, I started to notice changes. My posture was straighter, my clothes fit better, and even my coworkers commented on how confident I seemed. By the time summer rolled around, I felt like a different person. One Friday afternoon, my boss asked me if I wanted to represent the company at a networking event. Normally, I would have said no. Too busy, too tired. But this time I said yes. And you know what? I had a great time. I met people who were doing interesting things, made connections that actually led to opportunities. It struck me then how small my world had been for so long, orbiting around Mom and Ryan's problems. Now, I had my own orbit, and that was when I decided it was time. I called the bank and set the process in motion to have myself removed from the mortgage. The banker explained that it would require Mom and Ryan to either refinance or assume the loan fully in their names. If they can't qualify, she warned, they might have to sell. Then they'll have to sell, I said simply. When the paperwork was ready, I scheduled a meeting with Mom and Ryan. I didn't tell them why, just said we needed to talk about the house. Ryan texted me back almost immediately: "About time. Let me guess, you're coming to your senses and offering to pay again." I didn't reply. Instead, I sat back, looked around my apartment, paid for with my money, filled with things I'd bought myself, and realized I wasn't nervous. For the first time in my life, I wasn't coming to them from a place of weakness. I had the power now. The meeting was set for Sunday evening at Mom's house. For the first time in months, I didn't feel dread pulling into that driveway. My stomach wasn't in knots, my palms weren't sweaty. I had everything organized in a neat folder tucked under my arm. bank statements, the reinstatement receipt, the mortgage paperwork with my name scheduled to be removed. When I walked up to the porch, the final notice that had been taped there weeks ago was finally gone. At least my payment had done its job, for now. Mom answered the door, looking nervous. "Jacob," she said, stepping aside. "Come in." Ryan was at the kitchen table, scrolling on his phone. He didn't bother to hide his smirk. "So," he said, "what's the big emergency? You finally decide to be a decent son again." I set the folder on the table and sat down across from him. "This isn't about being a decent son," I said evenly. "This is about facts." That got his attention. He put down his phone and leaned back in his chair, clearly amused. "Oh, this should be good." I took out the first document, the bank statement showing the mortgage delinquency and the reinstatement payment I'd made, and slid it across the table. "You were 3 days from foreclosure," I said, looking straight at Mom. "So I paid it. You're current now." Relief flashed across her face for half a second before Ryan ruined it by laughing. "Well, thanks for finally doing your job." I didn't react. Instead, I pulled out the next set of documents. Months of statements showing missed payments before I'd stepped in, along with screenshots of Ryan's online purchases and nights out. "You had the money," I said flatly. "You just didn't use it." Ryan's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "You've been stalking my social media?" "I've been documenting proof," I said. "Proof that you had every opportunity to pay, but you didn't. And Mom, you let him take over the payments knowing this was a risk." Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to give him a chance," she said softly. I nodded. "And now you've seen what he did with it." That was when I pulled out the final document, the paperwork to have myself removed from the mortgage. "This," I said, "goes into effect next month. From that point on, the house will be solely your responsibility. You'll either refinance under your names or sell. But my name will not be tied to it anymore." Ryan's face went red. "You can't do that," he snapped. "Yes, I can," I said calmly. "And I already have. This is just your notice." Mom looked stricken. "But Jacob, if we can't qualify, then you'll have to make some hard decisions," I said, my voice softening. "But I'm not carrying this anymore. I've done it for 3 years, and I've watched you trust someone who's never shown you he can handle it. Now it's his turn." Ryan pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly. "You think you're better than me because you have a steady job and a little savings?" I leaned forward. "No, I think I'm better than the version of me who kept bailing you out while you laughed behind my back." He glared at me, but he didn't have a comeback this time. I stood up, gathered my papers, and said, "You have 30 days. Make them count." Then I left. But that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. Because as much as I'd taken control of my finances, there was still one thing left that I hadn't done: make Ryan feel what it was like to live without a safety net. So I started digging deeper. At first, it was just curiosity. I wanted to see how far his irresponsibility went. But the more I looked, the more I found. He wasn't just behind on the mortgage, he was behind on his car payment too. His credit cards were maxed out. And that client payment he'd been waiting on, it was never coming. I knew one of his so-called clients from high school, and when I ran into her at the grocery store, she told me Ryan had never done the work he'd promised. "He owes me $1,500, she said bitterly. "And he keeps saying he'll get it to me next month." It's been a year. That's when the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I called up an old family friend, someone who'd worked as a financial advisor for decades, and asked him for a favor. I told him everything: the missed payments, the constant bailouts, the lies. He listened quietly, then said, "You want to teach him a lesson? Make him face his credit report. People like Ryan avoid reality until it's staring them in the face." He was right. Ryan lived in a bubble where everything magically worked out because someone else fixed it for him. Popping that bubble was the only way he'd ever change, or at least, the only way he'd ever stop dragging Mom down with him. So I set up a meeting. I told Mom and Ryan it was a financial planning session to make sure they could qualify for the refinance. Mom was eager. She wanted to save the house. Ryan was cocky. He thought this was his chance to show me he had things under control. I knew better. The night before the meeting, I sat at my desk going through my folder one more time. Every receipt, every screenshot, every document was in order. I wasn't just walking into this meeting as the responsible brother anymore. I was walking in as the one holding all the leverage. And I was ready to use it. The morning of the financial planning session, I woke up earlier than usual. I wasn't nervous, Not exactly. It was more like the quiet focus you get before a big game. I'd been waiting months for this moment, and now it was finally here. I got to the advisor's office first and took a seat near the window. The folder of documents sat neatly on the table in front of me. This wasn't just about saving a house anymore. It was about ending a cycle. When Mom and Ryan arrived, I could tell right away they were in two completely different headspaces. Mom looked anxious, clutching her purse like it was a lifeline. Ryan, on the other hand, strolled in like he owned the place, a smug little grin plastered on his face. "Ready to finally fix this?" he said as he sat down across from me. I didn't answer. Instead, I nodded to the advisor, who began the meeting by asking for permission to pull up the full credit reports for everyone on the mortgage. Mom nodded. Ryan shrugged like it was no big deal. The advisor's computer screen glowed as he clicked through the files, and then he turned the monitor slightly so we could all see. "Here's where we stand," he said. The room went silent. Ryan's credit report was a disaster. Missed payments, maxed out credit cards, delinquent accounts. There was even a notice about a collection agency pursuing him for an unpaid medical bill from last year. Mom gasped softly and put a hand to her mouth. Ryan went pale. This can't be right," he stammered. "It's right," the advisor said gently. "These are reported by the creditors themselves." I slid the screenshots across the table, the ones showing him bragging about his nights out, his new gadgets, his networking trips, and laid them down one by one like cards in a poker game. "You had the money," I said quietly. "You just didn't spend it on what mattered." Ryan glared at me, his jaw tight. "So what? You think you're better than me because you play accountant?" "No," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I think I'm done cleaning up after you." I took out the final document, the official notice from the bank confirming that, effective next month, I was removed from the mortgage. "When this takes effect, you and Mom will be solely responsible for the house. If you can refinance, great. If not, the bank will require you to sell." Mom's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, she didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, like she finally understood this wasn't a bluff. Ryan, however, wasn't ready to give up the fight. "You can't just walk away from your family," he snapped. I met his glare evenly. "I'm not walking away from my family. I'm walking away from you taking advantage of me. There's a difference." The advisor cleared his throat gently. "If I may," he said, "you do still have options. But Mr. Ryan, you'll need to make some changes, starting with catching up on your other accounts. Otherwise, refinancing won't even be possible." Ryan's face turned red. "So what? I just magically come up with thousands of dollars." "You figure it out," I said, echoing the words he'd thrown at me months earlier. Just like I had to figure it out when I was 24 and sitting in a bank parking lot at midnight, moving my last $200 to keep this house from defaulting. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the computer fan. Then Ryan shoved his chair back and stood up so fast it nearly toppled over. "You're pathetic," he spat. "You think this makes you some kind of hero? All you've done is make things harder for Mom." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even stand. I just looked at him and said, "No, Ryan. I just made it impossible for you to keep pretending you're not the problem." He froze, like he'd been slapped. Then he stormed out. Mom stayed behind, her shoulders slumped. "I should have listened to you," she said quietly. I didn't gloat. I didn't say I told you so. I just nodded and said, "You still have time to fix this. But it has to be you this time, Mom. Not me." When I left the office, I felt lighter than I had in years. That night, Ryan blew up my phone. Angry texts, voicemails, even a half-baked threat to take me to court. I didn't answer any of them. Because for the first time, I wasn't scared of his anger. And I knew this wasn't over. Ryan was going to have to face reality now, and I had every intention of making sure he did. The days after the meeting were strangely quiet. Ryan's angry texts eventually slowed to a trickle, then stopped completely. Mom didn't call for almost a week. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't lighting up every night with someone asking for money, a favor, or a last-minute bailout. At first, the silence felt eerie, like the calm before a storm. But then it started to feel peaceful. I threw myself into my own life even harder. I bought some new furniture for my apartment, started cooking real meals instead of eating takeout every night, even signed up for a weekend woodworking class, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I got a call from Mom. Her voice was heavy, like every word weighed 10 pounds. "Jacob," she said softly. We got the letter from the bank. They said we need to refinance by the end of the month or they'll start the sale process. I was quiet for a long moment. Can you refinance? She hesitated. Not with Ryan on the loan, she admitted. His credit is too bad. They said we'd have to remove him and qualify on just my income. But I don't think I make enough. There was a pause. I could hear the clatter of dishes in the background, Ryan moving around somewhere behind her. What are you going to do? I asked finally. Her voice cracked. I think we have to sell. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant like I thought I would. I just felt relieved. Relieved that it wasn't my decision anymore. Relieved that the responsibility was finally where it belonged. 2 weeks later, I drove by the house and saw the for sale sign in the yard. I pulled over and sat there for a minute, staring at it. This was the house I grew up in, the house where I'd celebrated birthdays, done homework at the kitchen table, stayed up late playing board games with Mom when she had one night off a week. And now it was ending. That weekend, Mom called again, this time asking if I could come by. Just to talk, she said. When I arrived, the house was already half-packed. Boxes lined the hallway. The walls looked bare without the family photos. Mom was sitting in the living room, folding a stack of blankets. Ryan wasn't there. Where's Ryan? I asked. She sighed. He's staying with a friend for now. We had a fight. I sat down across from her and waited. He blamed me for selling the house, she said after a moment. Said I should have forced you to keep paying. But deep down, I think he knows this is on him. I nodded but didn't say anything. She looked up at me then, her eyes tired but clear. Jacob, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. I should never have put all of this on you. You were just trying to help, and I let you become the only thing holding us together. That wasn't fair. Something in my chest loosened at those words. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed to hear them until that moment. I'm not angry anymore, I said, and it was true. I just want things to change. She reached over and squeezed my hand. They will. A week later, I got a knock on my apartment door. When I opened it, Ryan was standing there, looking like a completely different person. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes bloodshot. Can we talk? He asked quietly. I stepped aside to let him in. For a long moment, he just stood in my kitchen, staring at the floor. Then he said, I'm sorry. It wasn't loud or dramatic. Just quiet, almost embarrassed. I thought I had it all figured out, he said. Thought I was smarter than everyone. And then when it all started falling apart, I figured you'd just bail me out like always. When you didn't, he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. It scared me. I didn't know what to do. For the first time, I saw him not as the smug older brother who'd always looked down on me, but as a guy who was completely lost. You needed this, I said finally. He nodded. Yeah, I did. He didn't stay long. Just long enough to say he was getting a second job and working on paying off his debt. I didn't know if he'd stick to it, but for once, I believed he might actually try. A month later, the house sold. Mom moved into a smaller place she could afford on her own. Ryan found a cheap apartment across town. And me? I took the down payment money the bank refunded me from the mortgage and used it to start house hunting for myself. The day I closed on my own little place, a modest 2-bedroom with creaky floors and a yard that needed work, I stood in the empty living room and let out a long breath. For years, I'd been living for other people's stability. Now, for the first time, I was building my own. As I turned to lock the front door for the night, I thought back to that dinner months ago, to Ryan smirking across the table, telling me I'd never be successful like him. And I couldn't help but smile. Because now, standing in my own house, holding my own keys, I finally felt what success actually looked like. That was the last time Ryan ever mocked me. And the first time in my life I felt truly free.